I'm not sure you went into this offseason thinking, I'm going to spend $90 million on a catcher. So tell me when and where and how it happened in the face-to-face meetings with Wilson Contreras that you thought, you know what, this is going to be the guy we're going to get.
So I think you got to really back up, right? Like when you go into last spring, we finished that labor situation, we're back on the field. I knew it was going to be Yadi's last season. So as a group, collectively, we knew we were going to be in the catching market. Then, you see the season play out. We are spending a lot of time understanding what the free agent market is going to look like, but also the trade market, because we had an idea based on what was happening at the trading deadline, what might happen this offseason. And so now season ends and we start to focus really on what might be obtainable for the St. Louis Cardinals from a catching standpoint. And so the trick was keeping all these balls in the air, but making sure that we caught one of them. The worst thing that would have happened is all the balls are caught and the Cardinals aren't one of the catchers, right? That would have been a problem. And so ultimately, as we entered the winter meetings, we had a pretty good idea of what we were going to try to accomplish. Prior to the winter meetings, I did fly down with Ollie to meet with Wilson face-to-face. Reason being is we wanted to come out of there with three things. One is we wanted to get an understanding of who he was. I mean, he had a reputation, so I wanted to sort of talk through that. Number two, I wanted him to understand our expectations of the role. And number three, I wanted him to tell us what his expectations of the role were. So those were the three things we wanted to touch on. That's what really ate up most of the conversation. And it did take a few hours to get through all of that. And it was a very positive conversation. It was one that I thought was very informative. I think, now this is in past tense, so we all know how it ended up, but we felt very good about it when we left. Now, back at the winter meetings, we still have these trade balls in the air, and ultimately we're going to just make sure that we leave winter meetings with a catcher. What ends up happening in the trade market, those are moving very slowly. And some of the things that we're throwing out there, it's not gaining any traction. We're going back and forth, trading names, but we're never getting to a point where I felt like confident we might have a deal. So then that Monday night, I said to the boys, we're in a spot where this could end up where we're not happy. And so fast forward to Tuesday now, got up, met with the agent, asked them where they were. They countered our offer. I told them that's not really where we want it to be. And then by end of that day, we ended up having a deal with Wilson. In the meantime, there are some calls going back and forth with other teams, but the best part of this is that we ended up getting what we needed, and that was a catcher.
During that intense negotiating period, when you have all those balls in the air, are you going back and forth with Bill DeWitt? Can we go to this number?
So when you ask about the balls in the air, or note that, a lot of that's on the trade side, right? So the negotiation on the dollar point, typically the way Bill and I work is I sort of understand what my thresholds are. So it's not necessarily like picking up the phone every 5 minutes, giving him sort of up to dates if things are changing. So this was pretty fluid with respect to where we ended up. It moved pretty quick. And I think the reason it moved pretty quick, and we learned this in the press conference as well, is that Wilson really wanted to be here. He liked the idea of following Yadi. Some people didn't want to do that, but he did. He embraced that. And number two is I think he really appreciates the kind of team we have, how competitive we are year in and year out. And I think that's something that he really craves. And so I think the reason this moved so quickly is ultimately it was two parties wanting to get to the same place, and we were able to do it pretty quick.
So you have a unique situation with your starting staff in that all but one will be free agents at the end of this offseason. You didn't trade the prospects for a catcher. How likely is it, and how much is that in your mind right now to go get another starting pitcher with some of your surplus of prospects?
So the key really is where are the innings going to go, right? When you think about starting pitching, right now we do feel like we have 6 starters for 5 spots. If you add another starter to that, then you have 7. And then you also have some guys that are going to be competing for starting inning spots. Verhagen, possibly Palante, possibly Thompson. So I just want to be really careful in like how we think through this. I understand that when we're sitting here this time next year, we may only have one pitcher signed, but you might also have the emergence of Thompson. You might also have the emergence of McGreevy. You might also have Graceffo. So I think there's a little bit of maybe over speculation of what it's going to look like a year from now. But I agree, it never hurts to plan, and it never hurts to sort of think about what we might look like this time next year. In terms of what we do between now and spring training, in terms of adding something, we're still very much open for business. But how we think about what the right fit is, or what we think about turning some prospects for X, it really just depends on what that looks like and if we're able to do it.
And with those 4 free agents who are going to be in your starting staff this year, would you anticipate one of them being signed long-term between now and the end of spring training?
It's possible, but I can't speak for anybody. I'm not currently working on something today. But in the back of my mind, I know that's something that we should be thinking about. And I think over the holiday season, I'll definitely use my time to sort of look at what those values look like and see if there's something makes sense when we get into January.
How do you view Jack Flaherty at this stage of his career and his future as a Cardinal?
Hard to say what his future as a Cardinal is, but I would say I'm very excited about where he is. As you can imagine, it hasn't gone as planned over the last few years, but what we saw in 19 was super exciting. And if we see pieces of that again, I think that's exactly what this rotation needs. So there's a little bit of hope in that answer, but certainly excited about how his offseason's going and what he's capable of doing in 2023.
So I know you don't want to put labels on players, but of these young pitchers that we're hearing about, can you tell me if they have number one type of stuff, Tink Hence?
Stuff-wise, yes. There's also going to be a maturity factor. There's going to be a physical factor. But when someone throws, 100 at his age, it's not hard to imagine him being a 1 on a rotation. Now, he's going to have to learn to build up. He's going to have to learn how to go pole to pole. But there's a lot to be excited about him. And, the upside and how often he was asked for, I think is a pretty good proxy of what type of prospect he is.
What about Gordon Graceffo?
I think Graceffo's probably a year and a half, 2 years ahead of him. He's already shown that he can take on those innings. He's already shown he can have success at the AA level. As you know, once you get to the AA level, you're a step away from the big leagues. So I think what he's already accomplished is a little different than what Hence is. But stuff-wise and the ability to throw strikes, attack the strike zone, he's really a special pitcher and another guy that was asked for a lot.
So that's 2 potential number ones. And how about McGreevy?
I think McGreevy, you'd like to see a little bit more velocity, but maybe more so than velocity, just more aggressiveness. He is a strike thrower. Did give up some home runs this year at AA, but still had success. Net, it was a good year for him. So I think as he continues to mature in the professional game, he is someone that excites us. And to your point, I don't want to put a ceiling on him, but I certainly think he can be 1 of 5 at some point very soon for the St. Louis Cardinals.
So you're usually pretty guarded in talking about your minor league prospects. You haven't been in talking about Jordan Walker, saying he's the best hitting prospect since Tavares or Albert. Would it surprise you at all if he is your starting right fielder opening day?
I think I'd be somewhat surprised, but I guess this is going to be for the record, so I'm going to say I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked. He's an amazing talent. He's having a great offseason from a physical standpoint. Reports coming in right now are extremely encouraging. I think it's really going to be the ability to adapt to the speed of the game at the major league level. Remind yourself, again, he was just at AA, just went through a position change. He adapted to that really well, or made that adjustment well. So I think the expectations of him coming into camp are exciting. I also think it's a WBC season, so some of these younger players are going to get a lot more looks than normal, and he's one of them and could benefit from those looks.
Some organizations do just trot out that 21-year-old and say, boom, here's 500 major league at-bats. Cardinals have not done that. Maybe it's because you've had so many prospects, but isn't there just a part of you thinking, we need dynamic offensive outfielders, and if I give him 500 at-bats, he's going to have an 800 OPS?
Well, in fairness, what's Dylan Carlson going to do? We know what he has done. We know what he's working on, but we still believe he's capable of potentially doing that. You look at somebody like Tyler O'Neill. We've seen parts of seasons where he's putting up those type of numbers. As a reminder, a year ago, he was getting MVP votes. This year he struggled. He was injured. So when you look at our outfield, both those guys, there's pressure on them to perform this year. But I think they're going to embrace that. I think they want that, but they understand that, which is most important. And then obviously, we haven't talked about Lars, but Lars had a breakout year. Hopefully he can continue that, build on that. And if he does, based on what we have in the infield, now that what we have from a catching standpoint, we're really excited about our lineup.
Let's talk about Tyler O'Neill specifically. He's only 1 year removed from a .912 OPS season. That's the good news. The bad news is he's really only had one healthy season. So what is he exactly doing this offseason to ensure the injuries hopefully go away or fade away?
Yeah, I think for the most part he's working on more like speed type of things, not looking to get any stronger or bigger. I think they're trying to understand like flexibility, trying to like almost tap in more to the athleticism than just the pure strength off season. And I had an update last week. Sounds like that's exactly what he's doing. He is back here in town, or will be, and so he is going to work with our guys downstairs between now and spring training. So we're excited that we actually have people that can get their hands on him, and it's not just reports coming back from Canada. So, fingers crossed it works for him.
So you wouldn't be surprised if he does have that 500 at-bat season and you have no plans to move him?
No, look, when you talk about all the names that are being bantered about and possible trades and so forth, there's almost like no name that doesn't get discussed at some level or asked about. The bottom line is we like what we have. There's no doubt that, the corner positions, we need that production to happen. If not, then we are going to have to do something about that. Now, having said that, it's still only December 14th, so like how we think about augmenting our roster between now and the time we get to camp or the time we open, there's still a lot of time. One thing I've learned in this game, there's always opportunity to spend money. There's never a deadline. So there is ways to still update this roster, improve this roster, especially if we're getting feedback that things aren't going the way we hoped with some of our players.
What's your take on Nolan Gorman at this stage? Because a lot of people want to talk about what he didn't do, but he hit 30 professional home runs last year as a 22-year-old, and to have a second baseman with 30 home run potentials, kind of scary. Where do you see him right now?
So a couple things. One is I think what he did this past year was very exciting. I think the frustration is a little bit of the swing and miss, not being able to put the ball in play as much as maybe we had hoped. But you got to remind yourself he was 21. So we can be patient here. I do think the upside of him outweighs all the downside at this point. And so we're very excited about what we saw last year. We also have to remind ourselves he was a conversion, had to learn a new position at second base. I think he did a tremendous job there, and I think he'll only get better. So I think there's a lot of upside with Mr. Gorman, and I think the key thing for all of us is a little patience.
How do you get him at bats at second base when you have to play Brendan Donovan, who gets on base 40% of the time?
Yeah, that's a trick, right? And I think Ollie's going to have some stresses trying to figure that out. But I do think spring training does matter for some of these younger players. So you don't want to go in and saying this is just a strict competition or a tryout. But to some level, it really is. And trying to set up what we're going to look like for April does matter what we're doing in February and March.
Let's go inside baseball. When you go to California, what's said at that dinner with you and Nolan Arenado? Does he want to hear what the Cardinals are going to do this offseason, or are you trying to find out where his head is? Give me an idea of what happened at that dinner.
So when I met with Nolan, and that would have been back in October, it was really just more clarity on both sides. I'm lucky. I have a very good relationship with him. We're comfortable around each other. So, breaking bread, it's not something awkward or stiff. It was just a very open conversation. And I think, really it was just something that we both needed to sit down and talk through. But ultimately, I'm thrilled. He's back. And I think he's happy here. He likes playing in St. Louis, likes the environment, likes the community. And he knows we're committed to trying to find ways to win, and we're going to keep doing that. And when you look at this club, there's a lot of things to be excited about. Clearly, we just touched on the outfielders have to produce and be effective in terms of this lineup to really max out. But baseball's a long season. There's ups and downs for everybody. Even the very best players can have cold weeks or cold months. And so, it's really about sort of timing all that and creating depth. And I also, shared with him, like, the St. Louis Cardinals minor league system has probably never been stronger in the last 30 years or the last 28 since I've been here. So there's a lot of excitement about our future. And I think, he wanted to hear that. I think he knew that. But ultimately, it was nice just to spend some time with him.
So you mentioned the competition that will go on at spring training. Paul DeJong hit 74 homers over a 3-year span. Does he have a legitimate chance to win the shortstop spot, or that Tommy Edman is your shortstop moving forward?
I would say, sitting here today, I think Tommy Edman is our shortstop, but I wouldn't rule anything out. The good news for us right now, or maybe the good news for Paulie D, is he's down in Jupiter. He's doing it voluntarily, working with our coaches. And I think it's the first time ever in his offseason that he realizes change is needed. I think he over the last few years has been a bit stubborn on approach and how things are going. I think he looked at this past year. He saw a glimpse of excitement there for a couple weeks there in August. And I think he realized that what we're trying to do with him will ultimately help him be the hitter he once was.
So when you look at your roster, you have 2 of the 3 best players in the National League according to MVP voting. But roster-wise, Dodgers, Braves, Phillies, Padres, Mets seem to have more star power. So how do you view this in that, hey, let's win the division and then see what happens in October or see where we are at the trade deadline? I mean, do you think your team is as good as those squads I just mentioned?
I think anytime you try to determine something who's better or worse simply on paper, why do we even play the games? Of course we play the games. Anything can happen. Is this something that we might have to make a change at the trading deadline? Of course, but we know that, you know that, fans know that. I mean, we're open to that. Like I said earlier, there's always opportunity to find ways to improve your club, and it doesn't always have to be in the off season. I always find it scary if someone says you've won the offseason, because historically that doesn't play well in the season. I think the most important thing is we believe in the team we have. We have a lot of confidence in the players that we have, and we're excited to see what we look like and how we play, but we do believe we have a chance to be successful.
How do you handle criticism? I mean, you're in the middle of one of the most successful executive runs in baseball in the last 30 years. But everybody has an opinion on your job. In one sense, is it a good thing that you're in St. Louis where everybody is so lineup obsessed and roster obsessed? Or would you rather be in another market where there's a little bit more apathy and you're not quite as scrutinized?
No, I definitely would prefer to be here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, right? Probably at a point in my life where I could find some place to go if I needed to. But no, I love the fact that St. Louis cares about this team. I mean, that is a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing is we draw a lot of fans. We have people that truly and passionately care about what we do. That's super cool. The negative is sometimes when you're out and about, someone has an opinion, and you can't be rude, you can't be snarky back. You just have to accept it. But reality is I think we know what we're doing. I don't want to sound cocky or arrogant, but do we make mistakes? Of course. But I think that our time here and what we've accomplished here speaks for itself.